Concerning Book of Mormon authorship, some of the several times Sidney Rigdon appears to have admitted to his involvement. First, let us examine statements where Sidney Rigdon denies his involvement. When Sidney Rigdon claims to have had no hand in the creation of the Book of Mormon, he uses offensive and long-winded language. Brentsville, Illinois, March 14, 1872. Brother Joseph, I learn of late that some of the opposers of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints are resorting to an old story that the Book of Mormon was manufactured from a romance of one Solomon Spalding, and was accomplished by one Sidney Rigdon. Being somewhat acquainted with Elder Rigdon in the early history of the Church, and have heard him interrogated both in public and in private concerning his knowledge of the Book of Mormon, and the Spalding romance, and at one particular time and place while preaching to a large congregation, bore his testimony with such power in the Spirit of God that scores were soon after baptized, and joined the Church, I submit the following testimony from two others and myself. We, the undersigned, feel it our duty, and are willing to bear our testimony concerning the Book of Mormon at any reasonable time and place, and especially concerning the following incident in relation to Elder Rigdon. In the spring of 1833 or 1834, at the house of Samuel Baker, near New Portage, Medina County, Ohio, we, whose signatures are affixed, did hear Elder Sidney Rigdon, in the presence of a large congregation, say he had been informed that some in the neighborhood had accused him of being the instigator of the Book of Mormon. Standing in the doorway, there being many standing in the dooryard, he, holding up the Book of Mormon, said, I testify in the presence of this congregation, and before God and all the holy angels up yonder, pointing towards heaven, before whom I expect to give account at the judgment day, that I never saw a sentence of the Book of Mormon, I never penned a sentence of the Book of Mormon, I never knew that there was such a book in existence as the Book of Mormon, until it was presented to me by Parley P. Pratt, in the form that it now is. Phineas Bronson, Hiel Bronson, Mary D. Bronson. Brother Hiel thinks it was in 1834, but Sister Mary, his wife, and I think it was in 1833, so we have put it in 1833 or 1834. Phineas Bronson, The True Latter-day Saints Herald, Volume 19, 1872, pages 279 through 280. I told him what I had seen at Salt Lake City, and I said to him that what I had seen at Salt Lake had not impressed me very favorably toward the Mormon Church, and as to the origin of the Book of Mormon, I had some doubts. You have been charged with writing that book and giving it to Joseph Smith to introduce to the world. You have always told me one story, that you never saw this book until it was presented to you by Parley P. Pratt and Oliver Cowdery, and all you ever knew of the origin of that book was what they told you and what Joseph Smith and the witnesses who claimed to have seen the plates had told you. Is this true? If so, all right. If it is not, you owe it to me and to your family to tell it. You are an old man and will soon pass away, and I wish to know if Joseph Smith, in your intimacy with him for 14 years, has not said something to you that led you to believe he obtained that book in some other way than what he had told you. Give me all you know about it, that I may know the truth. My father, after I had finished saying what I have repeated above, looked at me a moment, raised his hand above his head and slowly said, with tears glistening in his eyes, My son, I can swear before high heaven that what I have told you about the origin of that book is true. Your mother and sister, Mrs. Athalia Robinson, were present when that book was handed to me in Mentor, Ohio, and all I ever knew about the origin of that book was what Parley P. Pratt, Oliver Cowdery, Joseph Smith and the witnesses who claimed they saw the plates have told me, and in all of my intimacy with Joseph Smith he never told me but one story, and that was that he found it engraved upon gold plates in a hill near Palmyra, New York, and that an angel had appeared to him and directed him where to find it, and I have never, to you or anyone else, told but the one story, and that I now repeat to you. I believed him, and now believe he told me the truth. He also said to me after that Mormonism was true, that Joseph Smith was a prophet, and this world would find it out someday. Life of Sidney Rigdon, by his son, John W. Rigdon, Miss pages 188 through 195. Keep in mind that John W. Rigdon was a true believing Mormon. Although John W. Rigdon was not an official member of the LDS Church during his 1900 visit to Utah, he eventually did submit a request to join and was baptized in New York on September 8, 1904. See the Tribune of October 8, 1904, page 12, and the Deseret News of September 24, 1904, pages 4 and 7. Now let us examine some of the times Sidney Rigdon admitted to his involvement. Statement of James Jeffrey. I know more about the Mormons than any man east of the Alleghenies, although I have given no attention to the matter for 25 years. I did not know I was in possession of any information concerning the Book of Mormon unknown to others. I supposed that as Rigdon was so open with me, he had told others the same things. 40 years ago I was in business in St. Louis. The Mormons then had their temple in Nauvoo, Illinois. I had business transactions with them. Sidney Rigdon I knew very well. He was general manager of the affairs of the Mormons. Rigdon, in hours of conversation, told me a number of times there was in the printing office with which he was connected in Ohio, a manuscript of Reverend Spalding, tracing the origin of the Indian race from the lost tribes of Israel, that this manuscript was in the office for several years, that he was familiar with it, that Spalding had wanted it printed, but had not the money to pay for the printing, that he, Rigdon, and Joe Smith used to look over the manuscript and read it over Sundays. Rigdon and Smith took the manuscript and said, I'll print it, and went off to Palmyra, New York. I never knew the information was of any importance, thought others were aware of these facts. I do not now think the matter is of any importance. It will not injure Mormonism. That is an ism, and chimes in with the wishes of certain classes of people. Nothing will put it down but the strong arm of the law, otherwise it will go on forever, like Tennyson's Brook. This is the substance of what I remember about the matter. James Jeffrey. I hereby certify that I wrote the above paper at the dictation of Mr. James Jeffrey, in the presence of Mrs. James Jeffrey, and in Dr. John M. Finney, Reverend Calvin D. Wilson, Mrs. James Jeffrey, J. M. Finney, M.D. Witnesses, Churchville, Hartford, Connecticut, M.D., January 29, 1884. The statement was published in the Presbyterian Banner, Volume 70, Pittsburgh, February 13, 1884. Number 25. 40 years before 1884 would have been when, in 1844, Sidney Rigdon claimed he would publish the history of all the secrets of this church. Continuation of Elder Rigdon's trial. Sidney's first revelation in Kirtland was telling the people that the kingdom was rent from them, and they might as well all go home, for they were rejected. After we had been and spent the evening with him last Tuesday and had concluded to demand his license, he then said he was going to publish the history of all the secrets of this church. Now I would ask, has Elder Rigdon accomplished his mission? Has he sought to build up the church according to President Smith's order? No. He has been holding secret meetings, he has ordained men illegally, and contrary to the order of the priesthood, he has been ordaining men to the offices of prophets, priests, and kings, whereas he does not hold that office himself. Who does not know that this is wrong? President Young arose again and said he wanted to read some testimony which had been presented to him relative to this case, but did not wish to mention the names of the individuals at the present time, if it could be dispensed with. He continued, honest men may be deceived for a time, but they will generally see their error and turn about. There are some who are trolling off and wanting to make divisions amongst us. Brother Sidney says, if we go to opposing him he will tell all of our secrets. But I would say, oh, don't, Brother Sidney. Don't tell our secrets. Oh, don't. But if he tells of our secrets, we will tell of his tit for tat. He has had long visions in Pittsburgh revealing to him wonderful iniquity amongst the saints. Now, if he knows of so much iniquity, and has got such wonderful power, why don't he purge it out? He professes to have got the keys of David, wonderful power, and revelations, and he will publish our iniquity. Oh dear, Brother Sidney, don't publish our iniquity. Now, don't. John C. Bennett said in his exposure, he knew all of Brother Joseph's secrets, and he would publish them. Joseph H. Jackson says he has published all Joseph's secrets, but nobody believes their tales, because they lie. And if Sidney Rigdon undertakes to publish all of our secrets, as he says, he will lie the first jump he takes. If Sidney Rigdon knew of all this iniquity, why did he not publish it sooner? If there is so much iniquity in this church, as you talk of, Elder Rigdon, and you have known of it so long, you are a black-hearted wretch because you have not published it sooner. If there is not this iniquity you talk of, you are a black-hearted wretch, for endeavoring to bring the mob upon us and murder innocent men, women and children. Any man that says the 12 are bogus makers, or adulterers, or wicked men, is a liar, and all who say such things shall have the fate of liars, where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. Who is there that has seen us do such things? No man. The spirit that I am of tramples such slanderous wickedness under my feet, and if they take my life I will go where they cannot hurt me. Times and Seasons. Truth will prevail. Volume 5. Number 18. City of Nauvoo, Illinois, October 1st, 1844. Whole number 102. History of Joseph Smith. Continued. Pages 660 through 662, 664. Consistent with James Jeffrey's statement, Orson Hyde confirms that, in 1844, Sidney Rigdon was, in fact, in St. Louis. Journal History of the Church, Thursday, September 12, 1844. Elder Orson Hyde wrote the following. St. Louis, September 12, 1844. Dear brethren, we arrived here yesterday all well. Elder Rigdon said that he never felt happier, but his happiness appeared to me like the blaze from shavings, lively and brilliant, but of short duration. I do not think he intends to publish so much as he talked of. He said here to Brother Small that to tell the truth, it is not necessary to build the temple, for said he, if the temple is built the 12 have no power to administer the endowment. He said to Brother Small that Emma came to him on the morning of his leaving and told him that it was her intention to go with him and that the new translation and other important and sacred things she should deliver up to him. Clapp, a merchant on Main Street, came down with us. He appeared to side with Elder Rigdon. He seemed to me to be a snake in the grass. There is no dependence to be placed in him in my opinion. The brethren here appeared all warm for the 12. I sent on an appointment by Elder Hollister to Cincinnati for Sunday week. Next Sunday I preached here. It was a very swift boat on which Elder Hollister went out on, this morning, but Elder Rigdon did not go out on it for the berths were all engaged. He has gone to a very slow boat that will go out this evening or tomorrow. I sent on letters to Pittsburgh by Elder Hollister. I preached in town last evening and a very good feeling prevailed. I sent down to the boat and invited Elder Rigdon to attend, but he did not leave the boat, was sick with the diarrhea and vomited most of the night, so he told me, I shall leave no stone unturned in doing my duty. May God protect you from the mobs and writs. A man on the Osprey wrote to the governor in your behalf. I instructed him what to say and he said it. But keep this to yourself. The Osprey broke her shaft. This delayed our journey about 6 hours. All is right at Quincy. They are for the temple, the 12 and for God. They are all right so far as I can hear from all quarters. I shall write to the prophet, and why soon. Elder Rigdon told Brother Small that he had organized the School of the Prophets in Nauvoo and left them to carry on the work there, and he was going to Pittsburgh to carry on the work there. Brother Small is all right. Elder Rigdon's excommunication from the church was all over town when we arrived here. The news went by the birds perhaps. However, many here were expecting that would be the result with him. There is tithing here that I shall gather on my return. Closing in haste. More soon. Orson Hyde. Brother Young, Elder Rigdon told me in a conversation with him in this place that he had never come out against Joseph heretofore for Joseph's own sake, yet he said that he had corresponded with the great men of the state and was in possession of facts and power to have hurled Joseph from his station long ago, that he has corresponded with Mobocras in Illinois, I have no doubt, but that he ever had power to hurl Joseph from his station, I no more believe than I believe Lucifer ever had power to hurl Jehovah from his throne. Your brother, Orson Hyde. St. Louis, September 16, 1844. Fawn Brody, in Appendix B of her book No Man Knows My History, criticizes Jeffrey's statement saying, Rigdon never lived in St. Louis, but completely ignores the fact that, in 1844, not only was Sidney Rigdon in St. Louis, but he also said he would publish the history of all the secrets of this church, and was in possession of facts and power to have hurled Joseph from his station long ago. These facts give great credibility to James Jeffrey's statement. Sidney Rigdon's grandson claims that his family knew that the Spalding-Rigdon theory was the manner in which the Book of Mormon came into being. The Salt Lake Daily Tribune, Volume 34, Salt Lake City, Utah, Sunday, April 15, 1888. Number 155. The Golden Bible. Sidney Rigdon's grandson says their family understood it to be a fraud. Editor Tribune. In the intervals of my literary labors here, I have many talks with men who were in Utah at a very early day, and occasionally with original Mormons or their sons, which would be interesting had I the time to detail them. But my chance talks with one of these are so agreeable that I report him briefly for you. Mr. Walter Sidney Rigdon is a citizen of Carrollton, Cattaraugus County, New York, and a grandson of Sidney Rigdon, the partner of Joe Smith. He talked with old Sidney hundreds of times about that scheme of the Golden Bible, and his father still has many of the old Sidney's documents. Grandfather was a religious crank, says Mr. Rigdon, till he lost money by it. He started in as a Baptist preacher, and had a very fine congregation for those days, in Pittsburgh. There was no reason at all for his leaving, except that he got cracked. At that time he had no ideas of making money. Indeed, while he was with the Mormons, his chances to make money were good enough for most men, but he came out of it about as poor as he went in. But how did he change first? Well, he tried to understand the prophecies, and the man who is that is sure to go crazy. He studied the prophets and baptism, and of course he got rattled. Daniel and Ezekiel and Revelations will rattle any man who gives his whole mind to him. At any rate, they did him, and he joined Alexander Campbell. Campbell then believed that the end of the world was nigh. His millennial harbinger shows that they rattled all who listened to them in Ohio and other places. Then grandfather got disgusted and decided on a new deal. He found Joe Smith, and they had a great many talks together before they brought out the plates. None of us ever doubted that they got the whole thing up, but father always maintained that grandfather helped get up the original Spalding book. At any rate, he got the copy very early and schemed on some way to make it useful. Although the family knew these facts, they refused to talk on the subject while grandfather lived. In fact, he and they took on a huge disgust at the whole subject. Grandfather died at Friendship, Allegheny County, New York in 1876, over 80 years old. His son Sidney, my father, was born at Mentor in 1827 and remembers the stirring times of Mormonism. He lives where I do. Grandfather had preached to his old neighbors in Allegheny and taken converts to Nauvoo, so after the breakup in 1844, he returned to live at Friendship. For a while he spoke of Mormonism as an attempt to improve Christianity, but the later phases of the thing in Utah were totally different from what he had taught. His daughter Nancy Rigdon is now Mrs. Ellis of Pittsburgh, and her husband is a journalist in that city. Her testimony against Joe Smith is very strong. The prophet was no doubt a thoroughly bad man, etc. I only report a part of Mr. Rigdon's talk which shows the history of the Golden Bible as accepted in the family. Of course, if Sidney Rigdon had wanted the world to believe the Smith story of the plates, he would have told them so, but, though the family do not care to ventilate it, he evidently taught them to treat the whole thing as a fraud. J. H. Beadle, New York, April 7, 1888. Philo Dibble, who was an eyewitness, claims that, in 1831, Sidney Rigdon was going to expose Mormonism. On invitation of Father John Johnson, of Hiram, Joseph removed his family to his home to translate the New Testament. This was in the year 1831. At this time Sidney Rigdon was left to preside at Kirtland and frequently preached to us. Upon one occasion he said the keys of the kingdom were taken from us. On hearing this, many of his hearers wept, and when someone undertook to dismiss the meeting by prayer, he said praying would do them no good, and the meeting broke up in confusion. Brother Hiram Smith came to my house the next morning and told me all about it, and said it was false, and that the keys of the kingdom were still with us. He wanted my carriage and horses to go to the town of Hiram and bring Joseph. The word went abroad among the people immediately that Sidney Rigdon was going to expose Mormonism. Joseph came up to Kirtland a few days afterwards and held a meeting in a large barn. Nearly all the inhabitants of Kirtland turned out to hear him. The barn was filled with people, and others, unable to get inside, stood around the door as far as they could hear. Joseph arose in our midst and spoke in mighty power, saying, I can contend with wicked men and devils, yes, with angels. No power can pluck those keys from me, except the power that gave them to me. That was Peter, James, and John. But for what Sidney Rigdon has done, the devil shall handle him as one man handles another. Thomas B. Marsh's wife went from the meeting and told Sidney Rigdon what Joseph had said, and he replied, Is it possible that I have been so deceived? But if Joseph says so, it is so. About 3 weeks after this, Sidney Rigdon was lying on his bed alone. An unseen power lifted him from his bed, threw him across the room, and tossed him from one side of the room to the other. The noise being heard in the adjoining room, his family went in to see what was the matter, and found him going from one side of the room to the other, from the effects of which Sidney was laid up for 5 or 6 weeks. Thus was Joseph's prediction in regard to him verified. Philo Dibble, 1806 to 1895. Autobiography, 1806 through 1843, Chapter 1. In 1831, what was there to expose? No polygamy, no temple endowment, no daughter of Zion society, no brother of Gideon, no Danites, no council of 50, and no conspiracies to overthrow the government and install a theocracy. What, then, could Sidney Rigdon possibly expose? Notice that in using the word again, Sidney Rigdon implies that the bringing forth of the Book of Mormon was a revelation of the Lord given to him. Friendship, January 1871. Dear brother, post, the Lord in bringing forth the Book of Mormon and beginning again to reveal himself to me, or has given us an awful picture of the present Gentile world as subjects of his teaching. His word has no influence on their mind. They cast it from them as though they had no interest whatever in it, and those who pretend to receive it use, not as the Lord requires to enable them to perfect holiness before the Lord, but they convert it to a means by which they can gratify the lusts of the flesh, the lusts of the eye, and the pride of life. To such a purpose Joseph and Hiram Smith both prostituted it and introduced a system of corruption which destroyed the whole organization, and it seems impossible to get it out. No sooner does the Lord begin to bless a people that they begin to use the blessing to gratify carnal and worldly desires like J. H. and S. Newton. Yours as ever, Sidney Rigdon. Stephen Post Collection. Letter to Stephen Post from Sidney Rigdon, January 1871.